Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the Hall of Famer, the difference maker, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Great, Sean. Just back from RSA and ready to be back to work.
Fantastic. Well, we're putting you back to work because,
all right,
Tony, what we're talking about today, as part of our CISO translation series, what we're going to focus on today is when we're talking to the business. So we've got, technical discussions that we'll have as the next part of our series. But here now is really trying to communicate to the business. What makes sense? How do we really build a capability to identify what should be shared, the technical depth that we need to go into in order to share that, maybe to add some gravitas? Or is this simply a translation into financial terms that most know? But we have different layers of business, right? We have our users, we have our managers, we have our senior managers, our executives, boards, things of that nature. And so we've got to really, I think, traverse those levels in order to understand how to communicate. And what are some of the lessons we've learned over our careers in terms of, one, trying to provide a message, but also doing that in such a way that it resonates and that we get that message across effectively?
Yeah, I mean, you use the word translate. We talked about that in the prior episode. I think that's the right verb because it is, there's a lot of complexity, 1,000 details to the work that a CISO does. And at the end of the day, right, if the story doesn't resonate, it isn't understandable, then, you'll never get the support that you need or get the understanding that you're aiming for. And I think, but it's also to recognize, so where is the line between simplifying the story and still telling the truth? That is, you want technical accuracy, right? But you want it to be represented in a way that's accessible. And all those factors you name from different jobs. Another factor that I think's been big in my career is the culture of the organization. The way it thinks about itself or its roles. Like the easy examples, grew up in the Defense Department, so it was a war fighting mentality, right? And anything that affected that was important. And so to be able to tell the story, the impact upon war fighting. And I remember in the early days of this, people said, well, we told the J6, the head computer guy, there were 10,000 probes an hour or some crazy number, but that doesn't speak to impact, right? That speaks to noise. And so people look at that, and there was a process for patching, mandatory patching called IAVA, IAVA. I forget the acronym, but it was, and it's seen as in the military context, right? This is an order coming down from some higher authority to take action, report back that you have taken the action. And so there's a certain way that those things are perceived. If it's seen as in that chain, then it requires an answer. But if it's not presented in a way that people know what to do and know what a successful report looks like, you never get there. And so you have to, and IT people might understand that, but the mission commander or the head of the agency is, kind of watching glassy-eyed and going, yeah, but can I still do what I wanted to do with confidence? They're looking for some sign of that. And so if you can't kind of bridge that culture gap also, then you have a struggle.
Oh, agreed. Very important part, because in some cases, that's how you would calibrate some of the way you talk to an organization too. And, and let's say we're talking from the CISO perspective, with respect to the organization. And again, from a warfighting approach there is some gravitas behind what I'm saying, and action needs to be taken. Now, in some organizations, it's more collaborative versus a dictatorial type of approach. So again, like you say, you have to kind of temper how you approach both the words, your actions, and the way that they're disseminated. Very, very important. Because I've found in my career when I've had CISOs who have been very dictatorial. It's do this or we're in trouble, and it's five alarm fire for everything, and then it becomes the CISO that cries wolf, and then nothing will get done because here we go again. We're on this track, and again, that's very 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 important. Is that the sky is falling type mentality, or I've even seen Tony the compliance hammer. Oh, if we don't do this, we're not going to get certified. We're not going to have attestations, and it's going to be your fault. And then it's kind of becomes the blame game and trying to get people to do the actions you want them to do through this type of approach is never. I think only goes so far, and you can only do it so many times before it becomes tiresome and then puts obviously the organization in jeopardy when there is a true incident and requires action, and the reaction is, that this is the same thing again. Those are very important lessons I've learned and try to exemplify in the messages that I provide.
Yeah, especially it was an observation I made when my life was things like red teaming, penetration testing, and all that kind of work, and there was an implicit model there that was clever people come in, demonstrate they can walk through your perimeter and do these things, and the idea there was that boy, people will either be so scared or so inspired they will certainly fix this problem. And it took me a while to figure out that's not actually happening. They might be impressed, but the psychology, the incentives for fixing things are really different than those for finding problems, right? So that's part of your translation story, which is how do I treat these findings as something that then informs and motivates action? And you've got to think that process through. And the way I presented it, I don't know if you ever heard my riff on this one, Sean, was security sampling. I don't know if you ever heard that story of mine or not, but it was, the idea there, the precursor story was rocks in the ocean. I have a bunch of these, and the quick version, the deputy chief of the blue team, which was very successful, worked across the whole DoD, came to be one-time deputy chief, and he said, "Tony, we have a new slogan for the blue team. We're going to put it on the coffee mugs or ball caps or something like that, and we just wanted to run it by you before we do that." "Oh, great. What do you got, Bill?" And he said, "Securing the DoD one network at a time." I said, "Wow, Bill, that's very noble and that's great, but that's not what we're doing here." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Trying to secure something as vast as the DoD one network at a time is like throwing rocks in the ocean because you want to change the water level. It's too big, it's too distributed. That's you can't think of that as the ultimate solution. What you should think of, though, is every time we touch the network, so red teaming, think of it as sampling. I'm sampling from the environment. And every red team you run, every test, every scan is a sample of what's going on. And the purpose of sampling, we all learned in elementary science, was to draw conclusions about the population from which we are sampling. And the idea is you could, in the best case, you're pulling together information from technology and humans doing penetration tests and compliance reports and all this, and you're drawing conclusions about what needs the most attention and what are the root cause issues and what is fundamental and what can I build upon. And that's what a boss wants to see, right? They want to see a plan. They want to see that you understand the situation. You can explain it to them, maybe not in every detail, but in a way that makes sense, that says, okay, I have a plan for the next month, the next 3 months. Here are the resources needed. Here are the steps. Here's the actions by other people. But the idea that and the point of that was you don't want to see every test or everything as disconnected or useful by itself. It's part of some larger scheme. And that's how you run. That's the sort of healthy, I think, sign of the CISO's program, is it's all connected there, right? And I've watched you in action. Penetration tests are not, hey, we just test ourselves. It's time for this. No, it's part of a plan. I need to, and I want to direct the test in a way to get me the most useful information at the right moment in time. So we're not going to have free form wander through my network. We're going to say, look here, because this is the part I'm trying to understand and assess the risk of now. And so that's why I'm paying you to come in to do this kind of test. And that's the right approach to this kind of test. The early days of red teaming and penetration testing. I grant it. People forget the early days of this were, gee, executives don't know and don't care. I need to inspire them to action, right? I need drama. I need some dramatic thing, and don't convince yourself there's enough information to design a security program. I just need their attention right now. Well, any executive leader who isn't paying attention now is frankly needs other work because we don't need as much drama today. I hope. I get it, it's not 100% true, but we do need to test ourselves, right? Again, to validate that things we think are in place, to think that we haven't been blinded by our own context and sort of missed key things in our defensive strategy and so forth. So we don't need as much drama. What we need is more. I have a slide from 2004. We need fewer wizards, more mechanics in cybersecurity. More people to do things because we know a lot of things that need to get done. Anyway, so that's around that context of that's the story that I used. And again, it kind of played to the military context also.
Absolutely did. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to deconstruct that, Tony, because it's very important that we think about how that translates to many layers of the organization and strategies for communication. But with that, we'll be right back. Tony, cloud security is like setting up a new home security system.
You have responsibilities like setting up alarms and locking certain doors.
But unlike a home security system, cloud security doesn't come with a manual.
No, you don't have a definitive guide to what you need to harden in your cloud environments or how.
There's got to be a better way.
Thankfully, there is. CIS hardened images. These virtual machine images come pre-hardened to the CIS benchmarks, providing built-in cloud security and compliance without any guesswork.
CIS hardened images are also available for just cents per compute hour, saving you time and money managing your cloud security posture.
And all while using major cloud service platforms like AWS, Azure, GCP, and OCI.
Cost-effective cloud configurations, CIS hardened images are ready to go when you are.
Spin one up today by visiting cisecurity.org.
So Tony, we've got drama. We've got the compliance hammer. We've got this is an unassailable task that we need more resources for. So here, here's the penetration test. More budget, please. And it doesn't work, right? It's not a strategy that I've seen effectively. Communicate the actual risk, and you mentioned impact, but also likelihood. And we get into these issues with when there are the wizards around and it becomes a the secret sauce of how everything's put together and casting these spells and there's only a few people that could do this. So am I going to take it seriously? Do I really need to care about this? And I think that's the essence of making people care about what you're saying, because it does have potential impact, and with high likelihood, you want to have them thinking along the same lines of this, is understanding the risk, that we have a gap in which we cannot cover that risk appropriately. We don't have compensating controls. We cannot treat that risk appropriately based on what we're seeing. Here's the evaluation that we've done. So again, we're going through really elements of sampling, but providing those results. And here's where I feel we should approach this from. Either we're going to treat the risk, we're going to transfer the risk, we're going to just accept it, and I want to get your buy-in. And I found that when you try to communicate, one, with understanding, so you want to provide a narrative that is easily accessible. It's not this is cross-site scripting and we need a web application firewall and we need to go through code audit and we have to do this every other week. I have no idea what you said there, Sean. Let's do the translation. So I'll use my little air quotes here. And I think it's more of we have a gap. This is the underlying risk of this gap not being treated in some form or fashion. And ultimately, here's the risk. And that, I think, has for different layers of the organization, that has palatability. There's something there to say, okay, bring me into the conversation, show me your decision making, versus just telling me the world's on fire. And if I don't react, then, I'm the root cause of now the issue of not being able to manage this particular issue. That's not where we should be. Now, there are going to be situations where you need to escalate that fast. But I think it's building a rapport as well, Tony. So I think there's not only understanding the organization, the culture, some of the underlying politicking within an organization too, is who do I talk to that one will understand, react, and appreciate this type of message versus those that would look at a cybersecurity issue and say, technology risk. Don't bother me with those. I need to talk finance. I need to talk legal, HR. These are my risks. Technology, go talk to the CIO, go talk to the COO, and leave that be. And I think those are some of the variables we need to adjust. And again, this is not a set it and forget it for any organization, but it's constantly evolving. And I think that's one of the talents we need to build, or the skill sets from a CISO perspective.
Yeah, and I think you talked about the rapport, right? A fair amount of this. One of the CEO folks I got to know said, "What I'm looking for in someone in your job, John, is that they have a grip. They know what they're doing, right? I don't need to understand every detail, but we use as a tagline occasionally at CIS, right? Creating confidence in a connected world. Well, they're looking for confidence. That's your job, is to create confidence in something that they don't live and breathe every day, which is the impact of technology and the threats that they see. And so, that part of that translation is seeing the problem from their viewpoint. Does this mean that I'm behaving irresponsibly relative to the law or regulation? Does this mean I'm creating liability for the company, that I'm violating my fiduciary responsibility or whatever? They're looking for that, but they are never going to understand the technology, or unlikely to understand the technology to the depth you do. So they're looking that, yes, this person understands it. Now, some of that is tradecraft, right? Presentation skills and the way you speak on it. But it's also, when the question comes up, the answer, and you're also able to present to them the bigger picture of what's going on. So the temptation from the boss, and how many times did this happen? Boss runs in with the latest headline, this thing has hit our industry. Am I safe from this? Well, okay, that's a question you've gotten. This is the drama, right? We don't need the red team to give us drama. We have drama every day. So am I safe from this? And that's an important question. But you're trying to bring them to the larger question. That's one of a class of problems. And that we can't chase every one of those. That class of problems is best dealt with a program of, and it might be software improvement, it might be better architecture, it might be better tooling, better visibility into my assets, all that. And so that's where you're trying to bring them. It says, got it. Yep, that's important. And because we've made these investments in the past, we can feel pretty good about this, but this is part of a class of things that we do have gaps in our visibility. And there, for example, mobile devices, and therefore that's why I've been proposing we needed this, or whatever. You have to kind of present it in those terms. So that's that generating the confidence, right, in decision makers, that you have a plan that is, you have both a tactical ability to deal with problems, but a strategic sense of what's going on and how it connects to the business is paramount. You really need to be able to do that, and you have to also express. That's why using the as we both know, as everyone with a clue knows, right? There is no magical state of secure to which we will achieve one day and then let the machine run. We're always going to have gaps. We're always going to have problems. There's always risks. The question is, what is the risk visible? Can we make decisions based upon it? And there are multiple choices for that, multiple options for that. And that's sensible, right? To bankrupt your company in the name of let's spend more on security doesn't sound like very good business to me, as an ex-government guy. So we've got to present. So this confidence thing, I think, is really important. And then the ability to dig down, or part of creating that is both your demonstration of your technical competence. But one question back for you, Sean, and you hinted at it, the role of comparative data. Okay, so things like, where am I relative to my peers? That was an early question when I was wandering Wall Street after I retired. It was, hey, that's great stuff, Tony, but what are my competitors down the street spending on security? I'm not spending a nickel more, because that puts me at a disadvantage. Is that part of the story that you see?
It's still there, Tony. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the problem is, I think we've got into I don't have to be faster than the bear. I have to be faster than
Sure.
you. So if you're weaker, then you're going to be hacked and I'll be okay. And yeah, we should be, thinking a little bit differently.
Right.
The reason I say that is no two businesses are alike, right? That we all have our unique variables, as it were, in this equation, and trying to determine, well, within our industry, we've achieved this level of CIS controls compliance. So we're right at the 80th percent. We're doing fantastic. We've done all of this work, fantastic. But again, that doesn't really then contribute to the attack vectors that are particularly focused on us because of the work that we do. Well, the competitor down the street doesn't do the same work, right? That they're in a completely different lane, as it were, to the types of thought leadership we're providing, the support services for SLTTs. Those that have an interest in that are, of course, they're going to ignore and just come straight to us from a tactical perspective. And that then has the reason I do not like those statistics, because it gives us false sense of security. Oh, we're better than everybody else. Fantastic. Then that means we're secure. No, it's sort of similar to, well, we've got these certifications, right? So that means we're secure. No, it means we're compliant. It does not align to really security in any other way other than we've evaluated our systems. And the way we've built them is we'll do security first, and the byproduct is compliance. So we do comply with them. We can show that, we can attest to it from a third-party vendor assessment, and we're still secure. So we can, have both, as it were. And that gets us into dangerous territory, because I've had leads in other organizations who've said, well, we've got that certification, we're now secure. And then now having to explain to them what they just spent all this money on, that they thought was, oh, this is just security. This makes us better once we're certified, versus, no, we're still not secure, but we're better than we were, and we can actually attest to the fact that we're at a particular level. That didn't go over so well. So again, choosing your battles sometimes as well is very interesting. Making sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and at the end, you have to. You said you're here to support the business, right? Whatever the business's goals are, and so what you want is to help them uh, see risk, have risk made visible to them, and also, in a way, another point of comparison you mentioned earlier was they're worried about everything from employee safety to reputational risk to financial responsibility. So they're juggling a lot of these risks all the time. And those risks tend to have a longer track record and more concrete measures, right? Or expectations are set by the SEC or whatever. And so they have a sense for what that means. And in here, they don't really know what that means, right? So the 80% towards this is that, can I confidently conduct business on the web? Is this third party safe to be in my supply chain, right? They're trying to grapple with questions like that. And I think that's fair that they part of your challenge is to put the story in a way that helps them make those decisions. Again, not with perfection. We shouldn't expect it, and we won't get it, but in a way that allows them to not be paralyzed by these unknowns. Or I often say, how many times I was in meetings with people with multiple stars on their shoulders, and I accept the risk, in a DoD setting. They sign the paperwork, and we're not saying that because they see and understand the risks and they've weighed them. No, they're just frustrated by, that one of our board members refers to the technologist speaking to the board member as a speaking dolphin, little squeaks and chirps, and I don't get that. I know what you guys are saying, but I have important things to do. I'm fighting wars. I'm doing dangerous things. I accept the risk. And, in the grand scheme of risks that they're involved with already, they're willing to take the risk. Doesn't sound like the worst choice they could make, but it might have really deep implications for lots of the rest of the enterprise, for example. So This risk is often, not just your risk. There's all this risks that you don't see, the systemic risk that you create to your partners and so forth. It's very hard to get a handle on.
Oh, it certainly is. Because you think of this decision making. I love the way you frame that, Tony. So HR comes with a risk, and cybersecurity comes with a risk.
Mm-hmm.
The alignment in some cases is, well, I understand the HR risk. That's just personnel. That we can fix that, and you want the same amount of money for each. well, I understand this one. I hear the chirps from the CISO dolphin here.
Yeah.
Let me go with HR. We'll do that one. I feel safer in this space.
Yes.
CISO,
Point,
you
yeah.
go figure this out. That's a technology issue. We'll figure that out maybe down the line. But I think that becomes one of the important pieces, because as you start to look at business, and one of the things I've always said is, I mean, we've been using accounting terms in finance for thousands of years. I mean, back to ancient Egypt, that we have accounting principles. And so that has become a narrative and a language at the board level, at the executive level. I say we've got to be in that same space. And that was where it had led me to Dr. Tyler Moore at the University of Tulsa, who was translating security economics into these same types of conversations, looking at return on investment through return on security investment. And if we invest here, here's what we're protecting and how much it actually values the organization in those terms. And that's really what turned me uh, into thinking about it in a vernacular that can be more readily accepted. Yes, I want to throw in the issues that we're seeing across dynamic platforms and technologies, but I want to do it in such a way that is, I see the dollars and cents from this HR risk, and I see the dollars and cents from this cybersecurity. Now I've got comparative analysis. I can look at both with a distinguishing eye and make a more informed decision versus me coming in and saying, we've got XYZ advanced persistent threat with a 0-day, and it's in the XYZ system. And if we don't upgrade immediately at $100,000, we're in trouble. Blah blah blah. And okay, well, that made no sense. HR, what's your problem? Oh, we need a monitoring because we've got some insider threats. Oh, insider threats. What does that mean? Well, we've got insiders that could have access to data that they shouldn't, and we want to control. Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll go with that one. And so I think it's just the way it's phrased, and trying to blind with science, as it were, or in this case, technology lingo, is maybe not the key to appropriate translation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that gets lost sometimes, Sean, is that this creation of trust, right, in both your work or understanding and trust by the executives, is that this is a continuous thing, and so you need what you want is machinery that allows you to sort of constantly rediscover or recreate trust, because things are going to happen. Like one of the shaping, if you follow our community defense model work, one of the inspiration points for that, I talked to one of the financial sector companies, and again, there was a company that does a fair amount of Defense Department work back then. But the term that's a term that kind of resonated was kill chain. That's sort of a military oriented thing. But the idea was you could think of attackers as moving through stages, and my defenses will have different properties at different stages. And it would happen to be a financial sector company. What they would find is that, number one, they were looking for a way to kind of organize, how do I talk to executives about my security program? So the idea of stages seemed to be, understandable in a reasonable story. But they were in a business where there was constant merger and acquisitions. And at least in those days, it might still be true. You acquire a company for business reasons, and then you look at the IT and say, let's figure this all out. And what they would find by presenting it in this kind of fashion, they would realize, wait a minute, now in the combined new company, we have 6 or 8 different, front end perimeter blocking systems, almost nothing in the middle, and very little once the bad guy has gotten in, And so they use the sort of thinking like this as a tool to go to leadership to say, now that we have brought the IT together, we need to uninvest in half of these upfront things and have a more balanced program of defense spread across. So we'd like to take the savings and reinvest it over here. And we need some new money to invest here, right? Because we can't assume that we stop them 100% here. We want to make sure that we detect them inside here. And heaven help us, if they get in all the way, how do I prevent the exfiltration or the loss of intellectual property or customer data and so forth. But it was they needed a way to tell that story because of this constant, you just bought a new company and now we got to figure out what to do with it in terms of cybersecurity. And it turned out to be, that was, so again, but you want to be able to kind of reframe that decision quickly, right? you don't want to start from scratch. It's here's what we had, here's the implications of an acquisition, here's what it means we could uninvest here, reinvest there, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I've been through some merger and acquisitions, I tell you. And like you say, it's always technology will integrate at some point, right? It's just ones and zeros at the end of the day.
It's computers and
fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get back to you in a year after the project's supposed to be ended for the integration and tell you where we are. But yeah, I mean, that's always been really a challenge. And this is another thing. It's not I don't know that I've ever really heard this popularized, but here's another thought, Tony. And this starts with the SEC had moved forward with requiring cybersecurity expertise on boards and things like that, and at the executive level, or representation at least from the board perspective. And one of the things I was thinking about is, I think there is translation, and absolutely there's a requirement from the CISO to translate into understandable elements. But I think now there is also a requirement and responsibility from the boards and executive leaderships to build a vernacular in the cybersecurity risk space. We know it's a business risk, and ultimately there should be an element of, I shouldn't have to translate this down, to the early grades, as it were, at least a high school level of understanding. If we use that analogy, is going to be, I think, is potent, and I think is required now from boards and executive leads. I happen to report to a board who is vastly knowledged in cybersecurity.
Yes,
I'm spoiled in that space in some cases, and but with others, I think there's a need to understand that this should become part again of your skill set, is starting to understand the cybersecurity risks, because the impact of them is across literally every business unit, right? There is a technology, there is an internet connection, there is access to data at some form or fashion within each business unit. And taking that on and representing it as, oh, I need awareness. Now, I don't need to be the expert. We have the CISO as the expert. But let's make translations easier if I'm actually starting to prepare and do some of that work myself, I think can help. And I think we, again, obviously I'm biased speaking from the CISO side of the house, but I think it would help ease some of that translation issue over time, that we can get to a better form of communication quicker if we're both working at it in some cases. But anyway, just a thought that popped into my head there.
Yeah, I think that, the awareness we think of, it's easy to think of, I'm going to train again. I see this and I react to that, right? I know to classify it as something dangerous or unknown. But some of that also is around, I think more broadly, awareness is about seeing everyone's role. You started, I think, our conversation around the role that everyone has. One of the first things we did before I merged into CIS was a study to look at the critical controls. And the idea was, okay, if you're making the case, these are the most important things to do. But they're not all the actions of the IT department. So how could I map those into job roles? In other words, what should executives know about these things? What should supervisors know? What should researchers know? What should office people know about all of these kinds of things? And we tried to map, the set of things that we have decided are the most important to do into the responsibilities that people had in their jobs. And that's a sort of a logical way to think of it. And what we used was if you're familiar with the NIST NICE framework, right? This is the closest thing we have to a standard framework for assigning those jobs in cyber. And what you were aiming for there was for everyone to see their role has some importance in terms of the security of the company, its ability to operate. But you get all these mixed messages. And I used to say, Sean, if you make security too cumbersome or expensive, your users now become your attackers. And so remember, you're around long enough to remember when Dropbox became a verb, right? Or a thumb drive they thumb drive around your perimeter. They they Dropboxed past your scanning. And employees doing that, right? And it's not because they're evil people. It's because they see their job in front of them. I need to move these gigantic files from inside to my PR firm, for example, or the photography company that's doing a thing on us. and they see that is a job responsibility, and they talk to the evil, uncaring security people who say you can't move anything bigger than whatever, and so they face that dilemma, and so they are conscientious about their job. They don't see the bigger implications, and so they do what they think they need to do: break it up into little files, sneak it out on thumb drives, whatever. I don't see that as evil. I see that as people who don't have the total picture of what's going on. So the difference between does someone in your job see the older model, right? You're the enforcer, you're the keeper of the flame. Your job is to stand on the mountaintop and call out wisdom and punish the guilty, etc. And if you my experience has been, if you don't help people with their mission, legitimate job objectives, their mission, then they will do something worse that is out of your sight, right? That escapes your ability to understand risk. And so, and that's not an easy trade-off, but I think the world has evolved to a more healthy view of that, which is these are legitimate needs, and therefore we have to meet them, but we need to do them in the way that the enterprise is comfortable enough with the risk, right? It doesn't introduce overt risk. I can do, if I need to monitor, if I need to check, if I need to have a human in the loop, I'll do those things, but I have to balance, the need of the mission and the job duties of people along with the risk. And again, you have to assume that they don't understand the full risks, but that you don't want them again attacking you, small with air quotes, attacking you, with good intentions, right? Because that's their job.
Oh yeah.
So I think that and that once I got to see that, it helped shape my thinking about this too. To say, you know what, I don't want to be the lonely guy on the corner. Get off my cyber lawn here, because people have work to do, and the purpose of IT is to empower that work. So we have to find ways to help people with that, and we have to protect people from dangerous things, and we have to ask a certain level of responsibility of them. But at the end of the day, we have to make some trade-offs and think intelligently about this. And I remember, all right, one more story. So it was the military Army, and probably a 1-star, I think it was. And, had a big crash. We're out there helping them. We need to find the person who failed to put the patch in place that left us in risk. Make an example of them. Very GI oriented way. My dad was an Army sergeant, just to let you know. And I said, sir, any enterprise that has put its fate in the hands of your youngest, least paid, least equipped member of the workforce is more guilty of bad strategy than of having bad people, right? Because that person, if that person had said to you, I need to, sir, could I take the mail server down for a couple hours? We're so far behind in patching. We need to, oh no, mission critical, So they're dealing with conflicting requirements. They're fighting a space age fight with Bronze Age tools. And, our network is designed in such a way that the simplest action by the lowest level person is disastrous. I don't think I can blame that person. Now, they have a responsibility to do the right thing. Obviously, it's defined in their job. But a lot of this business it's unclear what the right thing to do is on any given circumstance. So it's a little bit of forgiveness, I think, could go a long way with that. But it was seen as, by the way, a myth, by the way. A number of people say, well, you work in the Defense Department. The person with 4 stars tells the person with 3 stars, who tells the person with 2 stars, and everybody just salutes and jumps and runs, right? Oh, please. Anyone who's worked in the military or military organizations going, oh my gosh, it's like this, tribe of warring factions that fortunately will come together whenever the nation needs them. It's not nearly as top down as one might think, because it's so large and so distributed and so complicated. But it's, it's a temptation to hope for that top down, but I don't wish for it, believe me.
Exactly. Yeah. Tony, well, we've come to the end of this part of the series. Next part, we're going to start translating to technical. So we're going to go and how do we work with our technical teams? Tony, as always, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Sean.
And thank you to our audience. Remember to subscribe in all the usual ways with your preferred podcast provider. Catch us on YouTube at The CI Security. Questions, comments, concerns, email us at podcast@cisecurity.org. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.